I have been waiting to share this with you for over a month now. So grab yourself a cuppa and I'll show you what's inside. I'm so excited to share with you art supplies from two of the most innovative companies I know. And best of all, they're now collaborating with one another. I'll give you more details about that in just a bit. If you like creating art outside of your house, whether it's plein air painting, nature journaling, or travel art, you're going to want to see these products because they'll make leaving your house and painting so much easier. First is a company called Art Toolkit. It was started by Maria Coriel Martin and born of her love for art and the environment. She travels to remote locations to paint and share her passion for polar and glacier science with others. How cool is that? And as a result, she created these, the most lightweight, streamlined watercolor and gouache palettes I have ever used. This one is called the Demi Palette, and it might be tiny, but believe it or not, it can hold up to 12 colors in these mini pans. Each pan is magnetic, and so you can move your colors around easily and even swap them out for different sizes, which I'll show you more about later. The lid serves as your palette, so it has everything you need to paint. All that for something that fits in the palm of your hand and weighs no more than a fairy. They also make a pocket palette, which is a little bit larger, about the size of a business card holder, but make no mistake, it's leaps and bounds more sophisticated. It comes with an additional mixing well, so if you like to paint with washes, you can still do that. If you want, you can include up to 28 colors in this palette, but I personally like that you can tailor it to your own needs by using a variety of sizes and arranging them like a puzzle. If you have colors you use more often, you can put those in larger pans. All of these palettes come in either silver or black, and it's hard to decide which I prefer best because both have a lovely matte finish. If you want even more space, they also offer a Folio palette, which can hold up to 60 mini pans. I personally love that with all of these palettes, you can use their standard size pans, which easily accommodate average size paintbrushes to make the experience of painting effortless. Or you can use the double pans, which are even larger. Maria created these travel palettes, as well as compact all-in-one sketching and painting kits, after her trials carrying heavy and bulky art supplies on her travels. And I couldn't be more grateful for these. I've had my eye on them for a few years now, and I knew I'd like them, but I had no idea how much I like them. I don't know if I'll ever go back to a regular-sized heavy metal palette again, even in the studio. You can purchase extra pans separately so that you can arrange and rearrange your colors to your heart's content. I'm going to be choosing and arranging colors for all of these palettes later in this video, including making one of them a dried gouache palette, so stick around if you'd like to see that. Let's talk a little bit about the size. The Demi palette is about 5.5 centimeters by 4.5 centimeters, and the depth of all of them is just over 0.5 centimeter. It literally just fits into the palm of your hand, and it's so lightweight. Even when it's filled with paint, it weighs hardly anything. The pocket palette is the most similar to a business card size, but it's smaller than a typical business card holder. This is a business card holder that I have that I use for my business cards. And if I compare the two, they're similar sizes this way, but the depth is completely different. A few other features of the pocket palette and all of the Art Toolkit palettes is that a business card wallet doesn't have any support on the sides, while the pocket palette does. So if you're mixing some washes down here, the water's not going to just drop off the palette. And the other notable difference is this lip on the bottom. And the pocket palette's pretty clever because it just has a very thin ridge so that you can actually access all of the paint pans. And that's really important in a palette. The size of the pocket palette is 9.5 centimeters long by just shy of 6 centimeters wide. And again, the depth on this one is the same. And the size of the Folio, which is the largest one, is still really portable. It holds a lot of paint, but it's only about 13.5 centimeters long by 8.5 centimeters wide. You may remember a few months ago, I opened this little Demi palette. And I've been using this in my travel kit and really loving the versatility of it. And I also love how super teeny tiny it is because I can put this in my pocket and not even know it's there. And it's such a lightweight, perfect way to carry around some extra colors or even if you're going to go on a small painting adventure, to take just this. I can even put it on my little handheld easel, and because it's magnetic, I can attach it to a magnetic strip and it's not going to fall anywhere. So I could literally take this and do a quick little painting that's a little bit larger and have an array of different colors. And the advantage of this is how streamlined it is. This is not going to take up any weight in your luggage if you're traveling or in your backpack. So what I plan to do with this extra one is turn it into a dry gouache palette. And I'm going to switch out the different pans and use it for that. And I'll also change the pans around in the pocket palette. In fact, I think that's one of the most fun features of this. I don't have to agonize too much about what colors to put in because I can just switch them out. And I can also move them around if I don't like the order. I also like that it has the larger mixing well, and I can put larger pans in so that if I want to use a larger brush and maybe do a postcard sized or even larger or a sketchbook painting, this will be really suitable for that. And I'm also really excited about the Folio because it's a way to carry larger pans and also a larger array of paint. If you're traveling and you're not really sure where you're going to be or what you're going to see, especially if you're traveling in the summer or to a region you're not familiar with, it can be really helpful, number one, to have some convenience colors so that you don't have to mix them all. And those could be colors that you mix yourself and put in one of these pans, or just colors that you buy. But you can also have some of those little extra colors, like pinks and purples or oranges or reds for summer, or rocks or flowers or anything that you might see that's a little bit more tricky to mix. Another thing I like about these is the little bags that they come with, because if you wanted to, you could just chuck your palette in here with a water brush and maybe even a small sketchbook, and you have everything you need to do a little painting. And you can just put that in your purse exactly like that, and it really takes up no room at all. And this is the largest one. If I'm carrying the pocket palette, let's see, I could still fit a water brush in there, and I could put some pieces of paper in there and maybe a really small notebook, but I could always have my notebook on the side and it's still just really lightweight and portable. So today I'm going to fill all of these up and talk to you a little bit along the way about my choices. And I think I'm going to start with the Demi and fill it with some gouache paints. But before I do that, let me share with you the next company that has forever changed my life as an artist. Rosemary Co Brushes, based in Yorkshire, England, have been my favorite brush company for about a decade, ever since I first discovered them through some of my plein air artist friends in the US. 99% of my oil painting brushes are from them, and I've been slowly collecting their watercolor brushes as well. So I'm absolutely delighted to share the news that they are now collaborating with Art Toolkit, meaning that if you live in the US, you can purchase the Rosemary Co travel brushes at the Art Toolkit website. And if you live in the UK or Europe, you can purchase the Art Toolkit palettes at the Rosemary Co website. Both companies provide international shipping, but it's always more convenient to purchase supplies locally. I'll put links in the description for both. Rosemary Co brushes are special because they're handmade in England by a team of brush makers personally trained by Rosemary herself, who started the company 39 years ago. They're made of the highest quality and are still surprisingly affordable. I've used a lot of different brushes in my lifetime as an artist, but there is something magical about the Rosemary Co brushes that is unmatched. I love everything about this company, including the fact that it's a family business, with Rosemary's daughter Simi being the sales and marketing director. They have a catalog of their brushes that are true to size, and if they don't have what you want, they'll work with you to make whatever you need. Their customer service is second to none. I've had a handful of conversations over the years with Rosemary, who has personally guided me in choosing the right brushes for my needs. And once during the first lockdown, when I was terribly sick with the first round of COVID, I ordered some brushes and mentioned that someday I would get some for my daughter as well, who was studying art at A-levels. A few days later, a box arrived from Rosemary with a selection of some of their extra brushes for my daughter. It's things like that that have made me a forever fan. They kindly sent me these 3 travel watercolor brushes to try, and I've been using them for the last few months. I even took them overseas when I went to visit my mom, and their quality is exquisite. It's so inspiring to me as a female artist to see creative, clever women running these successful businesses that bring so much quality to the art world, and I'm really happy to share this collaboration with you. The first thing I did for all of these was I took the time to plan out what colors I wanted to add. And I have the tendency to be a real perfectionist when it comes to that, but I just reminded myself that I have all of these extra pans, so it really doesn't matter. If I don't like the way something is, then I can just redo it or switch out colors. So I decided the most important thing was just to go for it and just get started. I don't really have other brands of gouache. The only one I really have are the Winsor & Newton, and I like them, but I really don't have a lot to compare them to. So this is what we're going to go with now. If you have any brands that you really love and want to recommend in the comments, please do, because I think I would like to maybe try some other brands and compare them. I ordered some of these extra pans because I'm really excited about the versatility of this and being able to add whatever pans I want. And for the gouache, I want the pans to be a little bit larger, so I'm going to use the standard pan size. And these are about 1 1/4 by a little more than 2 1/2. And this is the configuration that I'm going to use. I'm using a limited palette for this because I plan to use gouache in addition to watercolor. So I'll remove all of the mini pans. And I'll show you how I'm planning to configure everything. So on the bottom, I'll have my ultramarine and burnt sienna because I always put them together. They're always best friends on my palette because I mix them for so many things. That's how I make my grays and my browns. And if I'm doing a warmer shadow or a cooler shadow with foliage in landscapes, I'll use those and then mix a yellow along with it. And then I'll have my yellows and reds, and I'll have my white up here. And I think that I'm only going to fill the white halfway because I like to use white fresh. So I'm planning to maybe bring an extra tube if I'm really going to be doing some serious painting and add a little bit of fresh white every time I use it. And I'm going to just keep it all in the same pan because whatever I don't use can just dry and mix in with the other. I've had pretty good luck keeping a dry gouache palette before. I have one that I created, gosh, about 3 years ago, and the paint is still good. And a few of the colors cracked, but nothing got moldy and everything worked out okay. So I know some people have had trouble with mold, but I guess I've just been really lucky about that. So let's fill it. And because the pans are so shallow, it doesn't take much to fill them up. I also have some vegetable glycerin, and I'm going to pour a little bit of that into this dish. And the Art Toolkit has a post about how if you add just a drop of this to the gouache, it will help prevent cracking. So I'm going to give it a go. So I'll add just a little tiny drop on my toothpick and stir that into the gouache as I fill the pan. I think it's important not to add too much, but this is a new thing for me, so we'll see how it works. Some people add a watercolor blending medium, and I think that probably works too. So that's another option. I'm going to set this one aside for now and move on to the next. For my yellow, I'm using a primary yellow, and I've had a lot of success using this one before. It's almost like a cadmium yellow, but not toxic. And again, I'll take a bit of the glycerin, just a little drop, and mix it in. And then for my warmer yellow, I'm using yellow ochre. I don't really use yellow ochre very often with watercolors. I normally would use a raw sienna or a transparent yellow oxide because they're more transparent, but since gouache is an opaque medium, yellow ochre is probably a better choice. With my watercolor palettes, I've been trying to use mostly transparent colors. So the more opaque colors like cadmiums or yellow ochre, or even cerulean, which can oftentimes have a little bit of opacity to it, I've been passing over for the more transparent ones. These days I'm going for a really light transparent look with my watercolors. That one's really pretty. And again, with the permanent white, I'm only going to fill this pan halfway. I've chosen to use non-toxic colors for this because it is going to be a travel palette. So I've passed up the cobalts and the cadmiums and the titanium whites. The glycerin really does make it a lot creamier, and it really doesn't take a lot to do it either. I'm happy with that. And now for the main staples, my ultramarine. And this one's also pretty thick, so I may add 2 drops of the glycerin as well. I haven't used my gouache for over a year. And unlike the watercolors, which seem to last a long time, my gouache really hasn't. In fact, I lost a tube. Oil paints and watercolors last a lot longer, in my experience, than gouache paints do. I've given away pretty much all of my student gouache for that reason, because I'd rather have somebody using it than just having it sit and having to throw it away. I've got to say, 1 drop of glycerin really seems to be enough for this. And the final color is burnt sienna. I really, again, prefer transparent red oxide for the most part, even in oil painting. They're both made with Pigment Red 101 in every brand that I've seen anyway. The burnt sienna often will have a little bit more opacity, and it doesn't have the same freshness that the transparent red oxide does. But again, for gouache, I don't mind the paint being a bit more opaque. I'm really curious to see how the glycerin works. I'll do a little check-in after a month or so and let you see how it is when it dries. And of course, we'll look at it tomorrow as well when everything's dry. I'll let it dry overnight and then we can reassess. And now for the fun part, putting it all together. So I want my ultramarine on the bottom with the burnt sienna. And I always try to keep my red as far away from the yellows as possible because there is some cross-contamination that can happen. But in this palette, I'm just keeping the 3 primaries right here since it is a limited palette. And then I've got my 2 earth colors, my yellow ochre for a more earthy yellow and my burnt sienna for an earthy red. And then I'll put the white over there, which I never use in a watercolor palette, but is essential in gouache, in my opinion. So there we go. I love it so much, and I'll set that aside to dry. And now we'll fill the pocket palette. For the pocket palette, I think I'm going to use 12 different colors. I really like this essential set from Daniel Smith, and I use it all the time. So I'm going to pull some of these colors, but the one I'm not going to use is the Hansa Yellow Light, simply because it's not as light fast, which is really sad because I love it a lot. And it's difficult to replace, but I'm going to replace that with Lemon Yellow. But for the most part, these other 5 are going to be 5 of the essentials. And I debated about using Bismuth Yellow, but it tends to be a little bit chalky in the Daniel Smith. I prefer the Winsor & Newton Bismuth to the Daniel Smith one, but I will use the transparent red oxide, which I love, and the transparent yellow oxide. And both of these are also ones that I use almost all the time. And again, I'm going to use that lemon yellow. I think that I'll use the jadeite because it is a very earthy color and something that I could see being in trees. And it might be just a really nice convenience color, even though I normally prefer to mix my own greens. I thought it would be kind of fun to include one. I do have 2 tubes of quinacridone burnt orange for some reason. I think one came in a set. And although I wasn't really that enamored with it the way some people are, I do have a little bit extra, so it might be fun to just explore that one a little bit more. And then I really do like the Sodalite Genuine, so I'm going to include that one. And then some of the other ones on here that I really like a lot, I can put into the Folio palette, so I'm not going to be too worried about it. For the most part, I want larger pans in this palette so that I can do larger watercolors and be able to put larger brushes into the pans quite easily. So I don't want to load it down with the little ones, and I do really want to have an extra mixing well because I think I'll probably use this the most. I think I do want to use these two larger pans for the French ultramarine and transparent red oxide, and then probably next to that put phthalo blue, which is so staining that a little bit goes a long way, so I don't need a large one of that. And again, I don't think I'm going to use a lot of the little ones. The colors that I don't use a lot can be small. And honestly, so can my Pyrrole Scarlet and Quinacridone Rose because I don't use those as often either. How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, that's 11. How many do I have? 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, I only have 11, so that's good. I'll have my French ultramarine and transparent red oxide here, and then my lemon yellow, so that can reach the ultramarine for greens, and then my new gamboge, and then my phthalo blue, which I do also like to mix with both of the yellows and the transparent red oxide. So that makes sense. And on this side, I'll put the colors I want to experiment with a little bit more. So I'll have the Sodalite Genuine, the Jadeite Genuine, the Quinacridone Burnt Orange, and my transparent yellow oxide. Although I feel like I might want this down here. I think that's going to be the order. So I'll fill those now. And I don't need the glycerin for this, but I do need the toothpicks. And it's always nice to have a little bit of water in case you make an error you need to clean up. I do like the way that this is like a little puzzle. I've never really had a palette like this where I can mix and match different sizes so easily, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm having a lot of fun playing. I feel like I'm a kid doing a puzzle. I love the way those three look together. I mean, you could do a painting probably just with these three colors, and I bet it would be pretty interesting. I'm taking a little break just to tell you how much I'm enjoying this. The way that you can make the palette your own, the way that you can mix and match everything, and the way the colors look is so pretty. I've really never experienced a palette like this before, and they are not paying me to do this video. They did kindly give me the palettes, but if I didn't like these, I'd be honest about it, and I love these. And that's it. There they all are. They look so pretty. So we'll set this aside next to the gouache and we'll let that dry overnight as well. After what felt like 24 hours of trying to figure out where to put everything, I think this is the configuration I'm going to go with, at least for now. I can always change it later. I like the idea of having the mixing wells in the center. When I was trying to put all the colors on one side and the mixing wells on the other, it just didn't feel as intuitive. So I'm going to go ahead and put all of the colors in, and then I'll be back tomorrow to tell you what they are and to swatch them out. We're over on my side desk because it's actually really sunny outside and my normal desk is too sunny to film in. So that's pretty exciting that summer is here. I'm hoping that as I add some water to these, it will eliminate some of the cracking. And I think it's also partly my fault because I left them to dry overnight in the window, and it gets really hot and sunny in the window, and that might have precipitated some of this cracking. I already made a short video about these a few months ago, and I've been using them in a few paintings, so you may have seen these already. I just absolutely love them. Normally when I travel overseas, I just bring some of my studio brushes, like this one here, and I put them in a pencil wrap, and I agonize and worry over them, and they take up a lot of room, and I'm often worried that I'm going to damage the ends. And although I have other watercolor travel brushes, I've never had any good ones. Maria at Art Toolkit recommended these three, and Rosemary Co were so nice to send them to me. This one is called an eradicator, and I didn't really think that it was going to be of any benefit, but I absolutely was enthralled by the solid line that I could get from this little tiny brush. And I also like that I can scrub out colors with it. So this is definitely always going to come with me when I travel. And then these two are pointed round brushes in a size 4 and a size 6. And I absolutely love the pointed round brushes because they're so versatile. I can do everything from nice washes to fine details with the point. And it's nice to have two different sizes. And I think actually that I'd like to use the eradicator for doing the swatches. Maybe a combination of the pointed round and the eradicator. I'm going to start by spritzing the colors and giving them just a second for the water to sink in. And I also have a few scrap sheets of paper just for trying out different blends and playing around a little bit. I made these little swatch sheets so that I can keep them with the palette and write down the names of all of the colors and also have a little quick and easy reference. I'll start with the permanent alizarin. It's made with pigment red 176, and I like the fact that it's light fast. I have been playing around with the quinacridones a bit more, but there's something that is so lush and rich about the permanent alizarin, and I always find myself reaching for it. Gosh, the vibrancy in the gouache is really pretty. I like that. And again, the nice thing about these brushes is they have this point. So even though I can do a nice solid wash on the end, I can also get to a really fine tip. For the yellow, I've got the primary yellow, and this one has two pigments in it. It's pigment yellow 74 and pigment yellow 138. Normally, I like to have single pigment colors. I noticed that a lot of the Winsor Newton gouache is made with more than one pigment. Oh, it's so pretty though. I really like this as a primary mixing palette, and I think I'm going to be able to get a lot of versatility and different mixes with that. Next is the yellow ochre, and this one is pigment yellow 42. I really like pigment yellow 42 and 43. It's a beautiful earthy yellow. I use this color a lot for beaches. And also, if I mix it with a blue, I can get a really pretty reflection for a window. It's really opaque. I know you can water it down as well. If I water that down, I can get some nice transparent washes with it. So I like that versatility, that it can get so opaque so easily, but that it can also be quite transparent. I don't really need to swatch the white, but why not? And again, I've left half of that empty because I would like the option to bring a small tube of gouache with me when I travel and add some fresh paint. because the fresh mixes a little bit differently than the dried gouache. It has more opacity and depth to it. The gouache is an ultramarine instead of a French ultramarine. It's still pigment blue 29. And I believe that the difference between the ultramarine and the French ultramarine has to do with how finely the particles are blended or mulled when the paint is being made. And I find that the French ultramarine also feels a bit more violet, whereas the regular ultramarine feels a bit more of a primary blue. It has closer notes to cobalt, which is good for a primary palette. So these three colors go so nicely together, and I think I'm going to be able to pretty much mix anything that I'm wanting to with this. The burnt sienna is an interesting one in the gouache because it's made with two pigments, which I've never seen before. And again, I'm thinking maybe that's a gouache thing that they use more than one pigment. Normally, burnt sienna is made with pigment red 101 or sometimes one of the pigment browns. I tend to prefer the ones that are made with pigment red 101, which the Winsor & Newton watercolor burnt sienna is. But the gouache version here is made with pigment red 101 and also pigment yellow 42, which, if you remember, is the same pigment that's in that yellow ochre. So I don't know. I think it might be a little bit more orangey than red. It has a bit more of a yellow leaning towards it. I don't really know if I like that, but it's all I've got. I love this little palette. What do you think? Can put all this together and move on to swatching the pocket palette. I've just spritzed these and I think they're ready to swatch now. And I want to try using the eradicator for that because it gives such nice clean lines. Let me show you what I mean. Look at that. It's just this nice, crisp. It's surprising that so few bristles can give you such a solid, nice, clean, crisp line. And I never would have thought to use a brush like this had Maria not recommended it. So thank you, Maria, if you're watching. Because the bristles are a bit stiff, you have to be careful to not dig into the palette. So I'm just resting the brush lightly on the side and lifting the color. This is the lemon yellow, which is pigment yellow 175. And it's so pretty. And again, I've been looking for a nice yellow that has better light fastness than the Hansa Yellow Light. And I think this just might do it. Again, the new Gamboge is from the Daniel Smith Essential set, and I've been using this one for a long time now. It's such a pretty orange yellow. I want to keep these swatches a bit more on the transparent side so that I can write the colors on top and then read them. Lovely. This is the Phthalo Blue, which is pigment blue 15-3. And it's very staining and dominant in mixes, which is why it's not as big as the French ultramarine in the pan. But I love it. I can get so many beautiful colors with this. It's definitely a runner-up to French ultramarine in being one of my favorite blues. I can't imagine having a palette without it after having used it for the last few years. And I have the same two reds that I use that are in the Essential set. This one is the Quinacridone Rose, which is pigment violet 19. And it's a lot lighter than the permanent alizarin, but it gives really nice mixes. I have to be honest, I haven't missed the permanent alizarin as much as I thought I would when I used this palette. And then the Pyrrole Scarlet, which is pigment red 255. I've been on the search for a cadmium red replacement for a long time, and I think this is it, to be honest. I've tried lots of different ones, but this one behaves and mixes the same way, similarly to the cadmiums, and it's such a pretty warm red. I really like this Sodalite. Again, it is one of the Primatech colors from Daniel Smith. And I've yet to meet a Payne's Gray that I like as much as this one. It's like God created Payne's Gray in Sodalite, and you don't need to have a mixture of different pigments. You can get it right here with this. The next new to me color is the Quinacridone Burnt Scarlet, which is pigment orange 48. And I know so many people love this. To me, it's always felt a bit too similar to the transparent red oxide. But I have more than one tube of this, so I think I need to use it and explore it, and maybe if I do that enough, I'll begin to appreciate it more. Do you like this color? Let me know if you use this color, and if so, what kind of mixes you like to use with it. When I was looking at the cows in the field outside of my window yesterday, I noticed that one of them looked to be almost identical to this color. And I tried to get a screenshot, but he hustled out of view and behind the trees, so I can't show you, but you just have to trust me on that. And this is another one of the Primatech colors. It's called Jadeite. And I'm not one for using convenience greens normally. But this one is really nice. And I got the Primatech set, so I thought I might as well explore with it. Next, I have my tried and true transparent yellow oxide. I like to use raw sienna a lot, but not so much the Daniel Smith raw sienna because it's made with a brown pigment instead of yellow. And so I think this is a nice alternative to that. And this one's made with pigment yellow 42. My paints are getting a bit dry here. I did spritz them, but it's a warm day here in England. I'll put the French ultramarine in first. And you can see the difference. It has a bit more of a purplish cast to it than just regular ultramarine. So it's a bit of a warmer color. I used to get really confused about warm and cool because I used to think, well, the sun is yellow and that's as warm as you can get. But the way it works with color mixing is if it leans closer to red, it's warmer. And because French ultramarine does lean closer to red, it's a warmer color. I've started a series on my Patreon called Color Mixing Magic, where I like to explore and show a lot of the different nuances with color mixing that you can get. And here is the transparent red oxide. I was first turned on to this color by Richard Schmid in his book Alla Prima, Everything I Know About Painting. And he talked about choosing to use transparent colors versus opaque colors as an oil painter. And for that reason, he used transparent red oxide instead of burnt sienna. And after reading that book, I did a ton of swatches to compare the two. And overall, I'm just a total convert to the transparent red oxide. So there's my pocket palette, and I really anticipate using this very soon. I like this a lot. I like the versatility of colors that I can get by mixing all of these. And I'm very familiar with this. It's the basic palette that I normally use with these three colors added on the side. So I'm pleased to have them in a larger format for travel. Finally, I have the Folio palette. This is another one of those that I thought, yeah, I'll try it. I might, bring it and fill it up with lots of different paints when I travel. But once I got it and I realized how small it is and how lovely it feels, I thought, I'd much rather paint with this and travel with this than with the larger metal palettes that I use. But I've been really pleased with the way that I've been able to mix on the lid of the other palettes. So maybe with use, I won't need these as much and I can add other colors or make some of the existing colors that I like a lot a little bit bigger. Some of these colors you've already seen in my pocket palette, but I've added a few others that I'd like to play around with a little more. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to very quickly swatch the colors that I've already discussed in the pocket palette, and then we'll go through and swatch together some of the ones that I haven't mentioned yet. And this palette has a lot of colors that are similar to ones that I always use, but I've never really explored them. So this is an opportunity for me to do a little bit of playing with the paint, as well as having a dedicated palette for colors that I know that I love. I've swatched out all of the colors that I've already swatched in the pocket palette, and these are colors that I use all of the time. I already talked about how I chose to use the lemon yellow and how I chose that over the bismuth yellow because I feel that the Daniel Smith bismuth is a little bit too chalky. But as I was adding the lemon yellow to the pan, I ran out, and I remembered something that Sarah Burns said in a video about mixing the bismuth yellow and the lemon yellow together to get the perfect yellow. And I thought, well, I'll give it a try. I'm out of the lemon yellow and I did have this tube of the bismuth. So that's what I did for this yellow. So it's a mix of the two. And the lemon yellow is pigment yellow 175 and the bismuth yellow is pigment yellow 184. It will be interesting to see how this works in mixes. Oh, already I do like it. It seems to flow a little bit easier than just the lemon yellow. Maybe it's just the amount of wetness that I have to it, but this will be interesting. It's a little bit more opaque, and again, that's from the bismuth. But it is a pretty equal mix here. It's a 50-50, and I stirred it up pretty well. So it's going to be an interesting experiment, that one. This one is the quinacridone rose and the pyrrole scarlet, the new gamboge, and then the combination of the two yellows, the lemon and the bismuth. And then this is the transparent yellow oxide, the jadeite genuine, the transparent red oxide, the French ultramarine, and the phthalo blue. I wanted to include an ochre because they do tend to be a bit more on the opaque side than the transparent yellows. The Daniel Smith yellow ochre is made with the same pigment, pigment yellow 42, as the transparent yellow oxide. And I had bought a tube of this French ochre and liked it, and it's pigment yellow 43. So I thought this would be an interesting one to add to the palette and play around with it. And it's a little more yellow and a little less brown than both the transparent yellow oxide and the regular yellow ochre. It's a pretty color. It's nice and subtle, and I'm really looking forward to experimenting with it. In this section, I have the Cobalt Teal Blue, which is pigment green 50. I shall have to use this one sparingly when I'm travel painting because it is a cobalt color, and cobalts do have a warning on them. And honestly, I don't know how I wasn't thinking about that when I chose it, but it's here now, and I can definitely experiment with it when I'm in the studio or someplace where I can be sure to store my water and not dump it on the ground. I do love cobalt blue, and the cobalt teal I think will be nice with marine paintings or anything adding water, and it's one that I'm looking forward to using. This is Manganese Blue Hue, and this one came in the Angus McEwen set that I purchased. I probably would never buy this on my own because it's not as light fast. It has only a light fastness of 2, and I really don't like to use colors that aren't light fast, but it is pretty and I do have it, so I might as well experiment with it. And this one is Pigment Blue 15, and it has a freshness to it. It's like a really transparent cerulean type of color. It would be great in skies and in water, and I do like it. I'm sad to say. It's the manganese blue hue because manganese is a toxic color. And unfortunately, they couldn't seem to replicate it with a light, fast color. So this is what we have. The last of the blues I've included in this palette is Prussian blue. And this was the only one that actually had some issues with cracking, which is a little bit surprising. It's Pigment Blue 27. And I've tried using Prussian blue before because I know a lot of landscape artists really swear by it and love it. And I've always found that, to me, it didn't seem to be any better than the blues that I'm already using. But again, this one came in a set. I can't remember if it was the Angus McEwen or a different one. And I do want to try to appreciate what so many people see in it. I know that it can mix beautiful greens, and that's the reason why so many landscape artists like it. And it is really beautiful. I don't know, maybe I'll be convinced. This next color also came in the Angus McEwen set, and it's called Lavender. And it's probably not one I ever would have purchased if I had read the description because it's made with 3 pigments, including white, which I normally don't really like in watercolor. But you can just see, look at it. You can see how beautiful it is. And this is a color that you definitely see in the summer in flowers. And it has a bit of a granulating effect, it seems to. It's made with Pigment White 6, Pigment Violet 15, and Pigment Blue 29, which is the French ultramarine. So there will be a bit of color harmony there because it is made with this blue. I really like it. Next to the lavender is Amethyst Genuine. And this is another one of the Daniel Smith Primatech colors, and it's made from amethyst. It's a beautiful, rich purple pigment. And when it dries, it has a little bit of the same glistening color that you would see from a real amethyst. So there are little almost sparkly specks inside of it that make it so beautiful. I'm going to move up here and fill this in and then come back down so that I don't drag my hand in the colors as they're drying. We'll start up here with the Pyrrole Crimson, and I've got it right above the Pyrrole Scarlet, which I love. And Pyrrole Crimson is a nice, cool complement to that. And I'd like to see how it compares and mixes to Permanent Alizarin. It's almost like a cadmium red deep. It's this beautiful, rich red color. And I'm excited to include it. You can see it has more vibrancy. It's cooler than the Pyrrole Scarlet, but they're in the same family, and you can see that they get along together really nicely. And when I compare it to the Quinacridone Rose, it's a bit less transparent and more vibrant. I really want to see on the color chart how this one looks. And that one is made with Pigment Red 264. Up here is Rhodonite Genuine, which is made with genuine rhodonite. It's another one of the Primatech colors. I really do like the Primatech colors. It says that it has excellent light fastness, whether it does or not. I'm not sure I trust that. But it's a beautiful, transparent, fresh pink color. Usually the pinks that I like are not light fast, but this one says it is, and it's natural, and it's so pretty that I'm going to try it. I'm including some of the Buff Titanium. I'm normally not a fan of adding white to watercolor because I do like the transparency of them. And as I mentioned with the lavender, the white pigments do have a hazard for marine life, so you have to be careful using them when you're painting outside to make sure you don't contaminate any waterways. It is a really pretty color, however, and I thought it might be useful when I'm painting seascapes to create a sand color. It's made with Pigment White 6-1, and if you remember, Pigment White 6 is used in the lavender as well. This is Quinacridone Burnt Scarlet. It's an earth color, but it has a vibrancy to it. that's reminiscent of a lot of colors I see in the English landscape. It's a color also that you can see in nature. I'm trying to put it on in a transparent way, maybe add a little more opacity to one side. I've included raw umber. And like I mentioned already, a lot of these earth colors from Daniel Smith are made with pigment brown instead of pigment yellow or pigment red, which I don't love, but I have it. And I thought it would be interesting to explore because raw umber does give cooler mixes than some of the siennas. And it looks really opaque here as I'm putting it on. So let's add a bit more water. Hopefully we won't get a bloom. And you can see better here the transparency of it. I wasn't really sure what to add in these next two spots, and I debated a lot about that. But I decided with the raw umber that I would add some Van Dyke Brown. And this is also a cooler color. It's also made with pigment brown 7. But it's a bit darker and it has more of a brown feel and a little bit less of a yellow feel to it. A lot of my favorite artists or artists whose work I admire use Van Dyke Brown. So this is one that I thought it's just a good opportunity to experiment. I try not to have too many heavy brown or dark colors because I like my paintings to have a lightness to them. And you can see how inky it comes out right from the get-go. So I'm going to add a bit of water to this. I want to see how light it can be. And I'm aiming more for the color. So you can see when I put it next to the raw umber, it feels a bit more charcoaly in color. But it's a cool brown, almost a grayish brown. And for my last color, I have Payne's Gray, which if you've seen any of my videos before, you probably know that I am not a fan of Payne's Gray because it's usually made with pigments that aren't in the rest of my palette and it stands out like a sore thumb. The Daniel Smith Payne's Gray is made with French ultramarine and a little bit of black. And again, I don't normally like to use black, but I have it, so I should use it. One thing I've noticed is that the Payne's Gray from Daniel Smith is very bluish. That French ultramarine is really evident in this mix, and it is pretty. I don't like it as much as the Sodalite Genuine, but I ran out of the Sodalite Genuine, so I thought I might as well explore this. The Payne's Gray is a bit more subtle, whereas I think there's a bit more color in the Sodalite. Here are the final palettes all set up with their swatches, and I couldn't be more thrilled with it all. If you'd like a more in-depth look at the color mixes that I created while swatching these palettes, head on over to my Patreon, where I'll be posting a color mixing video showing how I was able to create many different beautiful and subtle mixes using these colors. Once again, I want to thank you so much for being here. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe because it really helps the channel to grow. And the YouTube analytics tells me that 40% of the people who watch my videos aren't subscribed. You know who you are. So please subscribe if you like my content and would like to see more. And hit the notifications bell so you don't miss my next video. I hope you all have a beautiful day with many happy painting adventures of your own.